Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Fast Track Forum. My name is Cameron, and today we're going to be looking back at the weekend that we had at Atlanta Motor Speedway, where we had Christopher Bell coming out on top during the Cup Series race on Sunday night in an overtime finish rivaling the previous year's finish. We'll get into that and discuss some of the details about that, and we'll take a quick look at the weekend ahead with Circuit of the Americas coming on up. So, taking a look at Atlanta, our top five included some familiar names. We had Ricky Stenhouse Jr. coming in fifth, Ryan Blaney fourth, Kyle Larson in third, Carson Hocevar in second, and as mentioned before, Christopher Bell finishing in first. Starting with Ricky Stenhouse Jr., another one of those kind of races where Ricky finds his way up towards the front there. Towards the end, he has all three of his career wins on super speedways, one at Daytona and two at Talladega. Again, showing that he is quite the force. Actually, he has four super speedway wins. Three? Two at Daytona, one at Talladega. He's got the 500, he's got the 400, he's got one at Talladega for sure, and then he won last year at Talladega. So he's got four super speedway wins now. Pretty impressive, considering he's still running for that single car team. What are they called now? Hayek Racing? I don't even know how to say their name. But in any case, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. coming home in fifth place. Again, not without some kind of controversy, though. He tends to be one of those drivers who finds themselves involved in messes at these super speedway races. I have to imagine a lot of it comes down to the fact that the super speedway races are the races where he feels that he has the best opportunity to win. And if not win, at the very least, come home with a strong finish for the team, considering that they don't always tend to be towards the front of the pack at your typical racetracks. So, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. gets caught up in a wreck at the Daytona 500 in the last week. This week, he was racing alongside of Chase Briscoe, and maybe a racing deal. Maybe Briscoe came up a little bit. In my opinion, it looked like Stenhouse came down, bumped wheels, shot Stenhouse up the track, and ran Chase Elliott into the wall, effectively ending the day of Chase Elliott, who went on to repair a broken toe link and some body work, but was able to regain laps, get back onto the lead lap, and ultimately finish in 20th position. That wreck also collected drivers Corey LaJoie in his part-time ride and Brad Keselowski, who unfortunately had nowhere to go when that accident occurred and ran right into Chase Elliott. Now, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., otherwise known as Recky Spinhouse Jr., is known to get himself involved in some of these issues. So it's not all that surprising. It just kind of seems to be one of those things he finds himself involved in on a routine basis, which is unfortunate. I'm sure he does not wish to be known for that. However, this is the reality that we live in, and he's not known for keeping it clean all the time. So, nevertheless, he's able to come home with a fifth place finish. Then we have Ryan Blaney, one of the three Penske cars. Again, Penske cars looking very dominant this past weekend. Penske cars, including the Josh Berry driven car for the Wood Brothers. Kind of a proxy teammate to Penske Motorsports. Team Penske. So Ryan Blaney had an interesting race. Started on the pole, but very quickly found himself falling through the field a little bit, was able to run up in the top 15 for a majority of the race, about 87% of the race. Average position of about 10th. So a slightly up and down day, the down being he got spun by Carson Hocevar going into turn one, kind of a bad bump, caught him at a bad spot, sent Blaney spinning through turns 1 and 2 along the apron. However, Blaney was able to escape this without much damage to the car and able to continue. He then had a late charge late in the race as the team figured out the handling of the car and was able to drive his way up to a 4th place finish. At one point looking like he was going to be getting more out of that. However, was stopped and ultimately came home 4th. So a good recovery for the team. Again, a strong showing for the Penske driver, who as well is definitely proved themselves to be one of the most successful super speedway racers currently on the circuit. Then we have Kyle Larson. Kyle Larson, the not known to be great super speedway racer, finally finishes a race at Atlanta Motor Speedway. I think I saw this statistic somewhere that Kyle has not finished a single race at Atlanta Motor Speedway since the reconfiguration of the track back in the 2022 season. So coming home with a stage win and a top 3 finish definitely absolutely feels like a win for him and that team. It must be a boost in confidence for him, or simply just a relief that he finally was able to have a successful super speedway race, especially after the comments that he made after the Daytona 500, where he just felt like none of the moves he was making were the right moves. He didn't know what to do. He felt very lost. Jeff Gordon supposed that he was very in his head, and that, just a lack of confidence with these races was really affecting him. So he was able to throw that monkey off the back a little bit and be able to come home with a very strong finish of 3rd and a stage win. Then comes the surprise of the race, Carson Hocevar. Carson was involved almost all race. He was in the top 15 for 90% of the race. Another average running position of 10th, so he was up there. He was mixing it up. He was told he was number 1 by Kyle Busch at one point. As mentioned before, he spun Ryan Blaney. There was a lot of drivers saying that he was driving very aggressively, driving over his head. He took a lot of flack from drivers, was spoken to by Ross Chastain post-race, Ryan Blaney post-race, lots of other media members, challenging Hocevar and his driving etiquette during that race. However, he's the one who came away with a 2nd place finish. So I kind of would prefer to have that driver in my car. I don't know. It was kind of refreshing to see somebody come in there and battle and fight and gouge for these positions. And you can say one way or another that he wrecked Ryan Blaney on accident, but he certainly did not take anybody out of the race, as we saw with some other drivers during this race. So I don't understand what the issue is with Carson during this race. He has a history of on-track incidences where he kind of loses his mind and goes and wrecks somebody, or has some kind of revenge against somebody, but that was not the case for this race. He was just racing hard and fighting for every position that he can, and ultimately came away with a 2nd place finish. So no harm, no foul in my book. It would be a different conversation if he actually wrecked somebody or, caused the big one or things of that nature, but not in this race. He comes away with a 2nd place finish, best finish of his career, and was very close to being able to steal this win away from Christopher Bell. Christopher Bell winning at a super speedway only a week after he had some very pointed comments about the super speedway racing package, saying that they needed to start from 0 and completely rethink the nature of the super speedway races, simply for the fact that he felt that at Daytona, drivers meant very little towards the outcome, that they were very much in a box in terms of what they were able to do in order to make something happen. He comes away with the win and showed that Atlanta is more like the old super speedway racing that we used to see than it is over at Daytona and Talladega. I think about the old Daytona prior to the 2011 repave, where the track was very bumpy, handling was a big thing. You had comers and goers. You had drivers who were able to work their way to the front because they had good handling cars who may not have qualified as well. You know, those are kind of the restrictor plate races that I believe these drivers want to have back. They want to be able to make a difference in the results of their own races. But in many cases, especially at Daytona and Talladega, they are stuck. They cannot make the moves. If they try to make a move and nobody goes with them, well, they are going to the back of the pack. Because those cars can just go flat out around those tracks, no problem. But Atlanta, the grip is a big thing. Drivers were talking about how bad their cars were driving in the pack and how different the car was driving in the front versus in the rear. We saw that with Joey Logano, who ultimately, once he lost his track position, was never able to get it back. However, he was one of the more dominant cars towards the beginning, along with teammate Austin Cindric, and of course Ryan Blaney and Josh Berry. So at the end of the day, I think fans and drivers alike are going to look at this Atlanta race and think very positively of it. Think that is the kind of thing we want to see at Daytona and Talladega. However, I just don't understand how they will be able to find that right formula at Daytona or Talladega right now. Those tracks are just fundamentally different. They're a mile longer. The cars can stay flat out all the way around, you know. So Atlanta right now is arguably on top of the hill of super speedways, and the race that, if you like this kind of racing, you should tune in. I'm sure Christopher Bell is feeling a lot better about the super speedway package this week after winning, so maybe he is a little biased towards it, but I'm sure he will give some good quotes, as he is usually one of the more honest and straightforward drivers on the circuit. Some other notes here. We had a great showing from Josh Berry. Josh was up there for a lot of the race. He led 56 laps. Very strong showing. Austin Cindric had 47 laps led. Joey Logano had 83 laps led. You know, so those three Penske drivers combined led a majority of the laps for the day. It was very refreshing to see somebody like Josh running up there and having success. Good to see the 21 car and Wood Brothers up there again. However, gets caught late, gets caught up in that wreck late at the end of the race, tearing up the car, ultimately coming away with a 25th place finish. So not exactly the result that they were looking for, but ultimately still a strong points day, as they were able to collect some stage points. Penske cars, again, similar to the Daytona 500, had a strong showing. However, you know, through race circumstances, were not able to get the finishes that they were expecting outside of, say, Ryan Blaney. Joey Logano came home with 12th. Again, he lost a lot of his track position late in the race and was never able to get it back because of handling issues. You had Austin Cindric, who was battling for the race lead late with Kyle Larson when Kyle Larson pulled a typical Kyle Larson move of kind of squeezing Cindric into the wall, not giving Cindric much of an option to either back out or hit the wall, and Cindric hit the wall, came off the wall. William Byron came in with a full head of steam and collected Cindric as they wrecked down towards the infield wall. It was an unfortunate ending to what could have been a very strong finish between Cindric and Larson, or whoever else wanted to get up into the mix there late as well. However, that is not how it happened, and Kyle Larson able to walk away from that accident and collect a third-place finish, while Austin Cindric ultimately came home in 28th position. William Byron in 27th. What else happened in this race? Oh, yes, the finish. So, this is kind of one of the big talking points this week, is the inconsistencies in the caution flags at the end of these races. We saw in Daytona 500 duel number 2, the caution was flown with about 100, 200 feet left in the race. We saw the Daytona 500 go green to the start-finish line as they were wrecking into turn 3 on the last lap. We saw the Xfinity Series race on Saturday night go green to the start-finish line as they wrecked in the back straightaway. And then finally, Sunday night, they threw the caution as there was another wreck on the back straightaway, ending the race with the leaders in about between turns 3 and turn 4, with Christopher Bell in front of Carson Hocevar and Kyle Larson as they were in a 3-wide battle reminiscent to the 2024 Atlanta Spring finish between Blaney, Busch, and Suarez. So the big gripe this week is the inconsistencies. NASCAR has come out and said that the drivers were the ones who asked NASCAR to throw the caution. The drivers felt that with the races staying green, it was unsafe. They're driving through debris fields. They're driving through spinning cars. You have some drivers who have a little bit more preservation in mind and will slow down for these accidents. However, there may be some drivers without as much preservation in mind, and they go driving through these wrecks, reckless abandon, trying to grab a couple extra spots. They see the freebies. They're trying to get them. And that can cause a big safety issue. So, ultimately, I think NASCAR is in the right to throw that caution on the last lap and end the race. As long as these guys can't figure it out and get their act together and finish these races under green naturally, NASCAR is going to have to do what they do. NASCAR came in and said today that they pledged to keep throwing yellow flags on those last laps. Ultimately, I think fans and drivers alike just want to see the consistency. And so if this is the way moving forward, then NASCAR, let's see it. Let's make sure that these cautions are being thrown on the last lap. As soon as these drivers start taking some hits, throw the yellow in the race, and it'd be that. I think it's just tough when you don't know when the yellow is going to get flown. You don't. At this rate, they didn't know. Last week, they got to race. This week, not so much. So, ultimately, the drivers are going to want these cautions to be thrown. They need to be protected from themselves. And the fans just want to know, they want to know what's going to happen. They want to have an idea of the trends, and if they see their drivers start wrecking on the last lap, they should expect a caution to be flown. So we'll see moving forward. We're getting away from the super speedways for a little bit until Talladega in the spring. So we may not see this issue come up for another few weeks unless you have some shenanigans happen late in some of these mile and a halves coming up. However, I'm sure NASCAR is going to take their time to really resolve these issues, speak internally, and get it all figured out. Speaking of getting away from super speedway racing, we've got Circuit of the Americas coming up next week in Austin, Texas. This time around, we are going to be racing on a slightly adjusted circuit. So, on the Track Circuits website, this would be titled as the COTA West Circuit. However, this is not exactly the West Circuit. So there's two kind of cutouts that divide the Grand Prix circuit. And the West Circuit takes the first cut through that has this little chicane in it with a big drop the V8 supercars ran this configuration a few years ago when they did a race over in COTA. However, no other large touring series has run that circuit since then. Now, NASCAR is making this decision, and I'm sure the track promoters are also making this decision to keep the cars a little bit closer to the grandstands. It's a very big track, so the cars get really far away. It's going to provide more laps for fans to watch, and ultimately just better viewing angles. It kind of keeps all the cars down towards the heavier populated areas of the racetrack during the race weekend. So, although it takes away the passing opportunity in turn 11 and then the big straightaway leaning into turn 12, it kind of feels like they're taking out two really big passing zones. But again, we'll just have to kind of wait and see how it races. But back to my other point about the actual circuit. So instead of taking the first cut through, that is the West Circuit, they're actually going to go to the next cut through, which creates this sharp left-hand turn onto a short chute, and then another about 90-degree left turn onto the back straightaway, leading down into Grand Prix Circuit turn number 12. Now, this kind of feels reminiscent of what they did with the Roval last year, where they adjusted that infield section that turned the left-hander onto Charlotte Motor Speedway turn 1 into a hairpin versus the sweeping left. So what's going to happen now is that these cars, as they go through the S's, they're going to be working through turn number 6. They're going to follow that right sweeper of turn number 6 and then make a hard left turn, a almost hairpin-like turn onto that short chute. I don't know how this is going to race yet. We haven't seen any cars on it. We haven't even seen or confirmed that that is the exact layout, but that's what the layout is showing on the Circuit of the Americas website. We don't even have that option on iRacing, so some of us can't even get on there to really test how it would race, since this is the first time this kind of format or this layout of track is being used. So we're going to have to wait and see until cars get on track to see how it drives and see what those real lap times are. So what can we expect? We can expect your usual cast of road course winners to be up front. Your William Byrons, your Kyle Larsons, your Tyler Reddicks. I imagine Chase Elliott will be up there as well. Can't forget about Shane Van Gisbergen, of course. He should absolutely be up there fighting for the win. And then you also have Connor Zilic, the young gun, the prospect, coming up, making his Cup Series debut with a Red Bull sponsored race car. It looks amazing. It's going to be awesome. But he is making his Cup Series debut. I believe he's 18 years old. He's rapid on road courses. Do I expect him to go out there and do like what he did in the Xfinity Series race last year at Watkins Glen and win? No. Do I think he can get a top 10? Probably. Top 15? Absolutely. Granted that there's no mistakes, that he doesn't get caught up in something, or himself or the team shoots themselves in the foot. Normal race circumstances, on pace, he should be definitely top 15, maybe even top 10. Very excited to see how he does this weekend at COTA. It should be an interesting one. I'm trying to find our schedule for this weekend, when we're going to be seeing cars on track for the first time. I believe we're going to see cars on track on Friday, but I do not have that information handy here. Weekend schedule. Here we go. Don't mind me. Friday, we've got Xfinity Series practice at 5 p.m. Eastern and qualifying at 6 p.m. Then on Saturday, we've got Cup Series practice at 11 a.m., qualifying at 12:30. Both of those are going to be on Amazon Prime. Then at 2:30, we're going to have the Xfinity Series race on the CW. And then finally, Sunday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern, we're going to have the Cup Cars racing on Fox and the in-car cameras on HBO Max, which is awesome. Highly recommend you go check those out if you have HBO Max. It's in-car cameras, it's the spotters and crew chiefs and drivers talking on a slight delay, but you get to rewind and go back and look at all different drivers throughout the races in case if something really interesting happens. You can go back and watch it. It's very, very cool. Definitely check it out if you can. But that's going to wrap it up for tonight. Looking forward to this upcoming weekend at COTA. I think it's a great track, great facility. Super excited to see this new layout, see how that goes. Atlanta, another great race for Atlanta Motor Speedway. Excited to go back there in the summertime as well. So NASCAR on a high right now, looking good. Excited to get into some more real racing. Not that Super Speedways isn't real racing, but let's see these drivers get out there and do what they do best, and that's race the best of the best in the stock car world, mano a mano, on these road courses and ovals. All right, so we'll come back next week to review what happens in COTA, and again, look at the weeks ahead in NASCAR. Appreciate you all listening in. Looking forward to this next weekend. We'll catch you in the next episode. Have a good night. Bye-bye.